right. It worked out. I'm glad. I apologize for the delay. I should have started sooner. We were having some typical difficulty as per usual, but we got through it. Thank you for joining me in the room with a special agenda. And today we're going to discuss something that one of the topics that, as a parent of special needs kids or children in general, we are raising humans that will become adults at some point, prayerfully, if things go on. When my son was young, I was convinced he was trying to harm himself until the end of his life early because I prayed every day, the Lord just let me keep him because he just kept doing stuff. So if you're fortunate, things go well and they get to a bigger age, and it is what it is. And if things go well, you have a good relationship with them and you help them to become productive individuals that have a standard of life where they can take care of themselves and they're happy in the choices that they've made. You've helped them to become the individuals that are not just contributing to their own life and others, but they are doing things that bring them peace and some bits of joy, but they're capable of doing the things that they need to do as adults. And when you have children that are on the spectrum or have other delays, your goal for them is for them to eventually get where they need to be. And they know what they like, and sometimes they don't necessarily understand what their gifts are because that's sometimes hard to have clarity on. Sometimes there's so many negative voices in their head that they're not sure, and sometimes outside of it. It's hard to have confidence when you seem to make lots of mistakes. But for many, when they have certain issues, it's hard to stay on track. And it's also hard to not have lots of negative conversations with yourself and realize that the errors that you make sometimes are just tools of learning. You don't learn to win without occasionally losing. So, with my kids, I had to learn to accept that they were making errors, but not make them feel like unrealistically that it would always be, things would always go perfect. And I didn't want to send the message that I didn't believe in them either. And as parents, sometimes we get carried away with the certain standard of what we want, that it doesn't occur to us that it's important that we invest in them with our time and patience, even if we don't have a lot of it, because everybody has it in varying degrees. Some of us have a lot. It is our ministry, it is our gift, it is who we innately are. And then there are those of us who have half of a teaspoon, and most of that teaspoon that they have is missing. But we have to be mindful of the fact that everything is done in stages. And in order for them to learn patience, sometimes we may need to step back from what we're doing, figure out a better way, and help them to have solution based conversations because those are the kinds of things that we've been working on. Um, Even more as they're getting older and as I'm getting older, of understanding that it's not always going to be perfect, and sometimes you may need to walk away from it and then start again. Sometimes, in order to find something that you're missing, you need to stop looking to find it. And if you're somebody who habitually loses things, you understand exactly what I'm saying. You'll find it when you stop looking for it. And the same thing with training them. Sometimes we have to adjust what our expectations are. Does that mean that we don't teach them the proper way? No, we may need to find a way to teach them in a way that works for them. And we may need to take a break from it sometimes. It's important as a parent that you don't get carried away with the process of teaching them to the point that you get to the point where you are doing it for them. You stop teaching them, you're doing everything for them. So when they get to a certain space and place in life, they're not doing much for themselves. We've assigned them what we believe they're capable of, and then we don't go beyond that. So we have that fear in every parent that has children that have extra needs, is what I call it. Um, have that fear that who's going to take care of them when we're gone? Well, if we're wise, if we're intentional in our teaching, if we're patient, they can do it themselves. They are capable of doing more than we believe. Even though we are responsible for aiding them, it's not just our lives and their lives we have to be mindful of in that manner. Because we forget that in those moments of fear, frustration, and being overwhelmed, that we can't be so consumed with perfection of things or fear that they won't manage it that we take over, and then they're not capable of doing it because we have decided not to teach them to do it anymore. And then we isolate others, including our children and ourselves, because in some ways we're fearful of criticism, which limits their experience and opportunities at growth. We started having more conversations with my kids about what they thought they could do. So I started to start the day with, besides just prayer, having a conversation about what we were going to do and what I call cross training, meaning one person doesn't just do one thing, regardless of their gender, what I believe their capability was. I decided to incorporate them in everything I do. It kind of started with my son, but it started in a kind of strange way. Not necessarily as a form of punishment. I don't necessarily use the term punishment as much as I call it supervision, because sometimes we need not just correction but assistance in the manners in which we are handling our day to day choices. And it kind of happened. We were visiting an extended family member, and my son kept making decisions that clearly I had asked him not to do, things that he was participating in that for the attempt at impressing others, he was making choices that was becoming problematic. And for the fear of not ending up in a correctional facility myself, I decided I wasn't going to constantly correct him in the manner that people were suggesting. Because for some children, you can not just harm them, injure them, and harm them to no life. Okay, we'll go there. Um, because it became quite clear that he wasn't going to make those choices on his own, and no amount of constantly giving him instructions was working out. So I decided to make him my shadow, meaning everything that I was doing, you doing it with me. So if you can't play with others, if follow the instructions I'm giving you in order not to end up in constant trouble, then you have to be my constant assistant. You are now my shadow. Everything I can do, you can do better. We're doing it together. And it started to make a connection with me that I realized not only was he not in trouble, he was learning something, he was assisting me. And as I learned to do those things, there is a certain form of pride that comes with realizing that you're capable and people are approving of what you're learning and showing them. Now you're gaining gifts and you're expounding on what you didn't realize that you had as a gift. And then down the road, I started to incorporate that with my daughter because I was doing so much for her. And when they had started doing things on their own, I stopped them. I kind of put the kibosh on that unintentionally because they weren't doing it in the right way. They were making their own food, but they were leaving my refrigerator open. They were leaving stuff out. They were making a mess. Rather than taking the time to walk them through each step, I stopped them and took over, which was ridiculous. So they regressed in such ways, and then they kind of stopped growing because I stopped giving them sunshine. I stopped giving them the light that they needed. I stopped watering them so that they would grow as they needed to. I was so worried about the amount of things that they were doing that wasn't correct. I didn't show them consistently how to do it correctly. And a lot of times we do that not just with our kids, we do that with other family members, other friends, our mates, who are trying to aid them and guide them. So we train people to not help us because we push them away. So we're training them to not be protected. You can do that even with your mates in ways that a lot of people complain about the way that their mate does this or doesn't do that. But when they were trying to, we stepped in, became really critical, and then started taking over doing it. But every time they would try to do it, we would interrupt again. We're setting a standard and then interrupting them when they try to meet it. And so, as a parent, you start to learn how important it is that you try to be consistent and training them also to learn to transition is really hard for them. So, having conversations where we started to discuss having solution based conversations. Rayla was upset today about something. And I said, it's important that you let me know when you're having a problem with something. And I understand that you are upset. And she asked, was I upset about her having a hard time? I said, I'm never upset about you having a hard time. But I get frustrated when you don't handle it well. It's okay that you cry, but it's more important. Like, what if this was an emergency? So we kind of went through a scenario of how she should handle an emergency. If she needed to give someone information and they only had a little bit of time, is it up? Is it more important that you give them the information or just let them know that you're upset? She said it's important that I give them the information. Why? She said because they don't have a lot of time. I said, so if this was an emergency where you were hurt or someone else was hurt, it's important that you give them information first, right? And the incident that we had at MomoCon where I foolishly made a decision where I left her in one spot. Trouble working out where it did not go as left as it was starting to go. It could have been a whole lot worse. But we got through it. It was fine. But I realized in that moment I didn't give her the verbal tools that she needed to handle it more effectively. And I said the next time you have to stay in one particular spot. If for any reason there's an emergency, you can always ask them, can I call my mom? And can I stay in this spot until she comes? She's like, okay. It's important that we teach them what they need to know to those transitional terms and what to do in particular situations. What to do if you're having a hard time and you can't find something. And that's important in every situation, particularly when we're having other people who are caregivers for our kids, whether that be an emergency situation or someone who will be regularly participating in their care and upbringing or assisting us in those emergency moments. Um, Letting them know what they should do in other particular situations, what to do if it goes in this direction or that direction. Sometimes we penalize people for things that don't go a particular way when we didn't give them the necessary tools in the event that those things happen. And it's as if we are limiting ourselves and creating our own, what I call Hades. So, helping my children has been a journey. And I'm sure many people who are in this village that have similar situations. Be encouraged that you are doing a lot for them. Try to take the support and encouragement that other people give you. Because sometimes, even when people are giving you encouragement, you don't feel like you're doing the job that it feels like they're giving you false encouragement for. But it's important that we let the ones that we're helping get their life together, our young ones, know that even in the moments that they're having their hardest times, that they're still doing a good job. But training them to regroup is not going to be easy, but it's important. And it's important that we keep getting them to understand that as hard a time as they're having, it does not make them a bad person for having a hard time. And it's okay to begin again. It's okay to ask for a break. But creating a timeline of how long that break is going to be and understanding what their options are when it comes to certain situations. So tonight, understand that it's important to train, but what are we exactly training for? Make sure that you know and they know how important each one is, including those around us that are helping us. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us in the room with a special agenda. Have a great night. Show each other love and patience and understanding as our Heavenly Father does us every day. Um, and remember, mistakes are just training to learn how to do it right. Have a great night. Thank you. Good night. Nobody's watching.